Ludwig Wittgenstein, Austrian-born, lived from 1889 to 1951, published a book called the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. Its German version was released in 1921, and its English version was released in 1922. In that book, he developed what has come to be called the picture theory of language. Before we talk about the Tractatus and the picture theory of language, I'd like to tell you about a concept called the principle of verification. And it was written really well in A.J. Ayer's book, Language, Truth, and Logic. And in that book, he states the principle of verification as this: the only permissible statements in discourse are those which can, in principle, be verified. Now, one way to think about that is in terms of science, in terms of the natural world. The example that A.J. Ayer used to use as a thing that could be, in principle, verified was discussions about what was on the far side of the moon, because when Language, Truth, and Logic was written, we had not actually been to the far side of the moon or gone around it, but now we have that technology, so we can see the far side of the moon, which actually proves his point very well. When the book was written, the things that he talked about, perhaps being on the far side of the moon, were in principle verifiable, even if he claimed that there was a lot of cheese, a mountain of cheese on the far side of the moon. That is in principle, or was at that point, verifiable. We could go to the far side of the moon and check that out. Now, it's a ridiculous statement, because we can, I think, safely assume that there's not a mountain of cheese over on the far side of the moon, whether we've been there to check it out or not. But that was the type of statement you could make. It was a claim which could be, in principle, verified. The correlation today with that would be Saturn's moon of Enceladus, which is the ice-covered moon with ridges and cracks along the surface that make a lot of astronomers lead a lot of astronomers to believe that there is an ocean underneath it, and perhaps some geologic activity which is heating the water, so they have a lot of hopes that they might find life on Enceladus. So they are talking about things, right, possibly finding life, which are in principle verifiable, right? So these are permissible statements. And one day we may be able to fly out to this moon of Saturn, to send a probe down through this sheet of ice covering the planet and see what is actually under there. But back to the point at hand, the picture theory of language. So I'm just going to read through these 6 points from the Tractatus. I've picked out these because I feel like going into much more detail is going to be more confusing than helpful. So these are the only 6 I'm going to worry about telling you about, and these are the only 6 that you should worry about learning as far as this course is concerned. If you find that you're interested in it, I'm more than happy to send extra advice, exchange emails with you, whatever you'd like to know. There are a couple of copies of the Tractatus online, free to view. You just type it into your search bar, and I may provide a link on that actually. So we'll figure that one out. But I'm first going to read through them as they're stated in the notes that I've provided for you, and then I'll go back and try to unpack them a little bit. Number 1, the world is all that is the case. 1.1, the world is the totality of facts, not of things. 2, what is the case, a fact, is the existence of states of affairs. 3, a logical picture of facts is a thought. 4, a thought is a proposition with sense. 7, what we cannot speak about we must pass over in silence. And there I've kind of indicated that the we is referring in many cases to philosophers, though it could refer to other people as well, but philosophers tend to have a lot of arguments about things which are in principle not verifiable. So, number 1, the world is all that is the case. What is the world for Wittgenstein? The world is the common experience that we all share. It is the moon and the earth. So the statements from A.J. Ayer saying that the far side of the moon, we can make claims about it, like there may be a mountain of cheese, and those are in principle verifiable because that refers to a shared experience that we all have, an undeniable thing up in the sky that we can all look at, know, and understand together. We'll understand what that claim is, and we'll be able to understand what would be the conditions for truth or for falsity. 1.1, the world is the totality of facts, not of things. Now in this one, Wittgenstein is making an observation about language. And it's clarified a little bit as we go into 2. What is the case? A fact. is the existence of states of affairs. So what he's saying is the world is made up of states of affairs, not of things. Right? It's not individual items. It's not made up of ball, book, table. No, it's not. It's made up of books on tables, balls being thrown through the air, bikes being ridden. Objects are always near something, in relation to something. That's the way they are in the world. Everything is in relation to other things. So in order to have a statement which is in principle verifiable, it has to match that sense. This is one of the reasons it's called the picture theory of language, because the idea behind it is that you're actually creating in your words a picture. And if that picture matches the world, then check mark, it's true. And if it doesn't match the world, then you get an X and that statement is false. Number 3, a logical picture of facts is a thought. So, a logical picture of facts, a group of states of affairs, that's a thought. Right? So you could take any thought known to man. I went to the grocery store today, I drove the truck out to the grocery store, I bought donuts and coffee. Presumably I ate them, right? So that is a collection of states of affairs, right? I drove the truck, right? Me in relation to the truck and what the truck is doing and where did it go, it went to the grocery store, etc. is a combination of relationships, right? Items in relation to one another. That's how we talk about things. That is where meaning exists. We cannot convey meaning by just using atomistic words, like book, ball, table, tree. We have to put those words into atomic prepositions. That's really what it is. The atoms of meaning are prepositions. The cat is on the mat. The book is on the table. Those are the fundamental building blocks, the simples that we then can make complex thoughts and expressions out of. So a thought is a proposition with sense. What is sense? Sense is what it shares in common with the world. If it's structured, as I said just a moment ago, if the thought is structured in a way that matches the structure of the world, then it is in principle verifiable. Now, I may have an incorrect fact in my mind. I may get something wrong, but that statement is still permissible. I can use it. It's just that now I can check it off and I can know, or you can know because you could verify it, or I could verify it, to see if it's true or false. Number 7, what we cannot speak about we must pass over in silence. This is especially difficult for philosophers, but I digress. What he's saying there is that any statement that is not in principle verifiable, we just have to let it go. It is not a statement that talking about God, or talking about ethics, or talking about aesthetics, are things that we cannot do. It's just a statement that we're not going to be able to make firm conclusions philosophically about the goodness of one thing or another. And when Wittgenstein talks about good, he does talk about good, he talks about it in terms of aesthetics very often. So when we talk about a painting being good, what we mean very often is that it represents the subject very well, or that it represents it in an interesting way that we can define, right? It shows the light, we might say. The same is true of statements about God or religious or spiritual beliefs. We can make them, and they can have sense, but not the kind that we can verify. So, philosophers should just let that stuff go. Ethically speaking, when we say that something is good, we may mean that it has instrumental value, right? So if I say that this is a good ball, well, it means that the ball is good for whatever purpose I have at the moment. So if I'm playing basketball, a tennis ball is not particularly good for that, right? This is a bad ball for basketball. Or if I have a basketball and I want to play tennis, well, that is a bad ball for that. So the term good is really not so much an ethical judgment, I think, in Wittgenstein's mind, but instead a vagueness, usually. It's a vague term when we could apply a specific term, right? The basketball is too heavy to be hit by a tennis racket. The tennis ball is too small to be handled well and shot at a basketball basket on a basketball court. So, key things to remember. Only statements concerning natural science, I think is the best way to put it, can be said. That is, propositions which are in principle verifiable. So one of the reflections we can have to think about what the implications of this idea may be is, are statements concerning morality and ethics verifiable? If we're talking about goodness, and I think to get a better sense of what we mean by good, explore the naturalistic fallacy with G.E. Moore and then come back to this question. But are statements concerning morality and ethics verifiable? Can we prove that something is good? How do we prove that pleasure is good? We can assert it. We can agree to it. But what in the world shows us that it's good? Against what world could they be judged true or false? And I think that's really the problem. Anyway, I hope this has been more help than harm. On to the next.